Let's talk about putting an opening for a neck in a cigar box. I get a lot of questions from a lot of builders on how to put the opening here for the neck. I know there's a lot of ways to do it. I've done a lot of experimenting over the years. Just all kinds of options on how you're going to put a hole in the box to receive the neck. But let me share some of the ideas and some of the things I do on putting in a opening for a neck. This is an interesting box. It's a Grand Puro by Punch. Got one of the coolest decals, labels that you'll ever find on a cigar box. Really neat. Nice little box, a little on the small side, plenty long enough, but a little on the narrow side, about 6 inches. But I'm going to go ahead and talk about cutting an opening in this box. First step, I like to use a lot of blue tape, and I like to kind of map out what I'm going to cut before I cut it. So I take the blue tape and I put it on kind of the front face and I put it on kind of the top. When I do most of my boxes, I like to have the neck inset into the box a little bit. It just makes them look a little nicer to me, so that's what I try to do. So I'll cut into the box a little bit so the neck will slide into it. But once I get the tape on there, then it's a process of beginning to outline the cut that I want to make. And it's pretty simple, pretty straightforward. One of the tools that's really handy, that if you don't have one, I suggest you get it. It's called a center finding ruler. I've talked about these before. And again, basically what it does is it has a normal scale on the bottom, 0 through 24. But on the top side, there's a 0 point in the center, and it starts to increase this way and it increases this way, inch at a time. So this is 0 and this is 1 inch this way and 1 inch this way. The neat thing about this tool is that you can lay it on a box, and if you match up the dimension on both sides, then this mark is right at the center. It just so happens this box is about 6 inches. So I'm about 3 inches on each side, and then what I do is I go ahead and put a mark there so I know where the center of the box is. Now I've already marked this ahead of time, but I'll kind of show you how I mark it as I'm doing it. So I come across, I know my center line. I just like to drop a center line and know where the center of the box is. And then the neck that I'm going to use, and most necks are this way for Cigar Box Guitar, is about 1.5 inches wide. Again, using this ruler and centering it up, having it on the center, what you can do is you can come over and mark 3/4 this way, 3/4 this way, and now you've got the beginning of a 3/4 inch slot. Another tool that I have is just this little machinist square, and what I do then is once I've got the 3/4 inch mark, I will come and I will drop a line down on that side, and I will drop a line down on that side, and then I'll look at the end and I'll take and see where the line is, and I'll come down and mark this end, and I'll mark this end as well. So now what I've got is I've got the layout of the 1.5 inches along the top, over the side, and down. The next step is to figure how far you want on the inset. I'm just going to use 1 inch on this for this example. 1 inch this way, and let's say we're going to do about 1.25 inches this way. So I mark it. Then I take a bigger square that I have, and I actually come in and I mark the bottom, and then I mark the back side of the opening on the top. And if you look at it pretty closely, what you can see is I've now kind of outlined the opening that I want for my neck. I've determined how far I want to come in, how deep I want to go. So this is the opening that I want to cut. And this is where I just tell people to go slow. The temptation is just to grab a saw and start cutting. But you're better off taking your time and doing a more precise operation on this. What I suggest is get a razor knife. And it's worth the effort to go ahead and change the blade and get a really sharp blade. And then come in and actually take your straight edge on your square and score it with your knife. Score the top and the bottom. Let's talk a little bit about wood and why that's important. I think all of us know that wood has a grain and it tends to run this way. On most of these it's the long way. And trying to cut and eventually break or saw going along the grain is the easiest way of doing it. When you go perpendicular to that and you're cutting across grain, it can be really tough. And that's when you can run into a problem. If you start sawing across there, you'll get what's called chip out or breakout, and it'll really look like it's a pretty ratty saw line. So what I like to do on certainly on these boxes is come in and again use my square, line it up, and now I've got, and I don't put a lot of pressure the first time, but then I come back and I increase the pressure. So I started off by penciling the marks, and now I've come in again with the knife and made some score lines. Also going to do that on the end. And now I've got those scored. I need to find a straight edge to come across and do the ends. And again, start off with light pressure, and then maybe in the second and third strokes you can actually go down a little bit deeper. So you've got a nice crisp edge there. Going to do it on the end as well. You have a nice sharp point. So we've got that scored. So we've scored it with our sharp knife. Looks pretty good. What we've done is on the ends where the grain runs this way, we've in effect come across and we've cut across the grain, we've cut perpendicular to it, and that's going to make for a little bit nicer finish. Won't have as much chip out on it. So then now that we've got it marked and we've got it scored, we've got to talk about cutting it out. And here's a few ideas and a few tips, a few things that I find that works pretty well. Sometimes when I'm doing a box, what I do is I cut a block of wood that fits tightly on the inside. Because when you're messing with this and it's a little bit flexible, you can have problems. You could now just start to saw this, or what you could do is actually go to a different step and actually begin by chiseling it. And again, if you didn't have this block in here, you would never be able to chisel this. So you can come in and where you had a score line, we're going to chisel a mark. I keep the taper on the chisel to the inside. Now if you're really brave and you really want to do this fast, you can drive the chisel all the way through. But I like to just make my marks. And then now that I've drew a line, I took my razor, scored it, I took my chisel and I made it a little deeper. It's usually pretty easy to saw this. I go ahead and leave this block in there and it makes it real easy. It'll kind of keep it stiff while you're sawing. And I use a really fine blade saw, just a good tool, a very narrow kerf, works really well. There's a lot of them out there. And what I find is because we scored the line and then we took a chisel and we made it a little bit deeper, that the saw tends to follow like maybe the point of least resistance, and it tends to like to follow that line that we've created there. Let's go to the other side. Again, we've got a blocker in there to kind of keep it nice and firm. A few draws to get it started. and we make sure we've got it done. Looks pretty good. Now here's another thing, again, as we talk about wood, knowing which wood we're dealing with. Most of these boxes are made of Spanish cedar, very thin. Here we have a end piece here. We can tell by looking at either on the outside or the outside that the grain runs this way. The grain is running this way. We cut across perpendicular to get this opening. But what I can tell you is from experience that, you know, if you look at that, it's kind of hard to figure out how you're going to get a saw in there. But what you can do is, again, because the fibers of the grain run this way, we can actually take the chisel and we can go a little bit deeper. We want to catch those lines that we scored with our razor. Now, because this is thin, I've had pretty good experience at just snapping them out. This one took a little bit more out of the inside than I would have liked, but you can see that I've actually got the opening. And it's fairly smooth. You'll need a file. You can come back in later on. And you can file and clean up the sides. We'll take a look and see how we did on the breakout. Again, because we scored it, we hope we are minimizing the amount of breakout. And by looking at it, we actually got a pretty nice cut here. This is pretty clean. These edges are pretty clean. We can file them, sand them, touch them up, and make it look a little bit nicer. Now let's talk about doing the top. Now, as we talked about, when we talk about the wood and it having a grain and be able to snap it, cut it, and break it, these tops, and a lot of tops on boxes, are actually made of plywood. And that makes things a little bit more complicated. Because with plywood, different than just a regular block of wood, we've got several layers of wood, and one layer the grain goes this way, the next layer it goes this way. So you're not going to get the benefit of trying to break with a grain of wood. But anyway, we have kind of the opening here. We know what we're going to do. This is again where we've scored the lines. What I'm going to go ahead and do on this, I've got a little maple block that I keep here that's nice and hard. I'm going to take my chisel, place it in the groove, come down and mark it, go to the other side, again place it in the score. Now I'm going to go a little bit deeper here, and you'll see why in a moment. So again, I've taken my chisel, gone into the score lines, and what I can do is, because I'm able to get the saw in there, hang it over the edge of my tabletop. It's a pretty sharp blade, so it cuts just on the downstroke. One more should do it. So now I've cut the two sides. It's a little tricky trying to find a way to get a saw in there, so what I typically do is, again on these thinner ones, it's pretty easy. That's where a nice sharp chisel comes into play, because what you can do is, again, put it down in there, little bit hanging on here on this end. We'll try and clear that up. Maybe look on the back side, got a little bit of breakout there. So you can see I've chiseled out the back side, and it's pretty square, pretty flat, looks pretty good. Again, as you're getting ready to finish it and do a little bit more work, you can grab your file, come in and file it, file the sides. And remove the tape. And I think we've got a pretty respectable opening. I think it's pretty respectable. The sides are clean. We can sand it and make it even a little bit nicer. But I think you can see we've got a pretty decent open ready to receive the neck. Maybe a little bit more sanding, a little bit of touch up. I can see a little high spot down on the bottom. I'm going to come in. Take my file, flatten that out, and I'm pretty pleased with that. Pretty square, pretty straight. Did a good job on the edges, not too much chip out. Looks pretty good, and it's ready to go. Hope you find this helpful. A lot of ways to do it. Experiment, try, get a bunch of boxes, see what you can do. It's pretty straightforward. Again, start small, start with the tape, pencil what you want, take a razor blade, score the lines, chisel to deepen them out a little bit more, and then the saw to come in for the finish, and then file and sand as needed. I hope this was helpful. Take care.